Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast. We are going to share an inside look into the fascinating world of prison power dynamics with inmates and correctional officers, specifically prison code, prison language, inmate leadership hierarchy, personality types, females in prison, and more. Ron, I know you have a lot of personal experience with this that we'll be drawing on today.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I've been in jail a lot, but not in jail.
Right.
So there's a little difference. Hey, Kristin, before we start, let me just tell you a humorous story. I was a brand new deputy sheriff, and I had a martial arts background, and some of the, we call them jailers in the county jail, corrections staff. So they give me a tour, and I'm newly in my uniform, and they said, "Oh, there's someone you need to meet." And they take me to this place, and this guy had long hair. He had his back turned to me, and he was wearing like boxer briefs, but he was completely tatted up. It looked like he had clothes on, but it was all tattoos. And there was a little blank spot in the middle of his back, and I'm going to get to that. But I didn't know what they were doing. This correctional officer, this is unprofessional, by the way. He looks at the individual. We're going to call him Jesse because that was his first name. He looks at him and says, "This is our new deputy sheriff. He's a black belt. When you get out, you've had it." Kristin, this guy turned slowly. I'm not kidding. He turned slowly around. And if you could have seen the look, he just started staring at me. And I mean, I got the EBGBs, as they say. I was like, oh my God. I wanted to, number one, murder the jailer to start with. But I just tried to look kind of as tough as I could. But just to put a spin on this story, he ultimately went to prison. And when he came back, they processed him again. He committed another crime. He had added in the middle of his back, the only place opening, 4 tombstones with 4 deputy sheriffs' names on the tombstones, and the Reaper of Death holding the sickle.
Oh, were you on one of those tombstones?
I was not. I only had that one meeting with him.
There's
a lot to him because I was given a warrant to go arrest him. Fortunately, he wasn't there that night. They got him the next night, and he literally broke a beer bottle and said, "Bring it on." It was a war. It was a war when they arrested him. So that was my jail tour. I just thought our listeners might find that interesting. It has nothing to do with what we're going into.
It is interesting. And so few people really get to understand the dynamic that actually takes place there. So I get to hear a few stories from my husband, but that's from a law enforcement standpoint. They can't wait to dump a lot of these guys off the drunk tank or at the jail, and it's a whole different world there. It is a
different world.
Absolutely. Well, let's start with the inmate population in the United States. This is from late 2021, just so you can get an idea. There are approximately 2.2 million people incarcerated. And let's break it down between local, state, and federal. So in local jails, it's approximately 745,000, state 1,300,000, and federal 182,000. And then there's others, because for those calculating this in your head, you're going to see a little bit of a discrepancy. That does not take into account immigration holds and juvenile offenders. Big numbers there.
No, that's... Kristin, here's the interesting part, and we'll talk a little bit about this. We won't get too political, but in my years of experience, and I serve on a board, I think the problem happens, there's the lock 'em up group, and then there's the release 'em group.
Right.
And there's got to be a midpoint, and the taxpayers are paying for everything that we'll talk about, or a lot of what we talk about. And also, the population, sometimes you've got violent offenders being released and you've got minor offenders being held. So there's no doubt that this does not get enough attention. Now, we're a leadership podcast where leadership meets entertainment. We're just going to entertain you a little bit today, but I do think there's some leadership principles that you can take away. But I do want to encourage our listeners, get involved, understand what's happening in the prison system because it impacts our entire country.
Right.
So hang with us and let's pull the curtain back and look at
Yes.
some of the aspects of the inmate population and correctional officers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to hear. I know you're going to dive into correctional officers. And again, this is rarely discussed material here. So get ready to learn something new.
It really is. You can Google some of the stuff and you can't hardly even find anything
Right.
about it. But let's start with, you've got the warden who basically is in charge of the prison. As a matter of fact, if there's lawsuits or something called vicarious liability, and the warden is always named. And my former mentor that I got to have lunch with a couple weeks ago when I was in Charleston, West Virginia, he was the regional administrator over the whole Eastern United States Federal Bureau of Prisons. And the stories that he told, but 15 years after he left the system, he called me and said his final lawsuit had just been completed.
Wow.
So he had been dealing with lawsuits for 15 years, even though he became the chief U.S. probation officer, he was still dealing with that. So, it's everything. We'll talk more about it. It's comprehensive. And there's so many issues. But let's start with correctional officers who are under the direction of the prison warden. And they use three types of power, and it's legitimate power, coercive power, and reward power. And those are pretty much what they sound like. For example, legitimate power is granted by the law and by prison policy that the correctional officer can enforce the laws and policy over the inmates. And then you have coercive power, and that's when the inmate believes what the correctional officers are saying, that it's coercion. They believe they can be punished. It's almost like when you threaten your children. If you do that one more time, it's that coercion. Now, coercion can also lead to illicit behavior, and we've heard many stories. I literally saw in the news the other day where a female inmate was pregnant, and wasn't pregnant when they entered the facility. That tells you a little bit there. And then there's reward power, and that's where the correctional officers just promise to reward them. It might be something from a commissary, it might be staying out longer, whatever it is, or on the yard. So that's three ways that they use, general ways they use their power. And the goal is for all inmates, of course, to do well, be safe, those kind of things. But here's the way that's broken down. When judges and legislators are determining what types of sentences should be instituted, they look at this. They look at retribution, deterrence, incapacitation, and rehabilitation. That's the four general aspects of sentencing. Retribution is exactly what you think. It's an eye for an eye. It's you're getting punished for the crime you committed, and that punishment needs to meet the crime. And there's of course, a large group of people that support that. They believe that the prison terms are too short, and they need to be longer, and that can lead all the way up to the death penalty. Then there's deterrence, and general deterrence is a sentence is pronounced, and the hope is that other people will not commit crimes because they deterred. They're afraid of that sentencing.
Right.
And it is believed that works in some aspects, but it's not been effective with the death penalty. I use a funny example. If you have an axe murderer, they're probably not going to stop in the middle and say, oh, wait, I could get the death sentence.
Right.
So,
the crime of passion. That's a different ball game.
That's exactly right. It is. And then there's rehabilitation. And rehabilitation is what we all strive for. And I know, I was a state and federal probation officer. And I can tell you that everyone was working to help people get rehabilitated, to help them change their thinking. We used to call ourselves agents of change. And we use cognitive-based approach to help people who get released from prisons to live productive lives. Of course, the courts want that. The prosecutors want that. Defense counsel wants that in an ethical situation. Don't you have a story about rehabilitation?
Yeah, I do. So my sister, she's 5 years younger than me, my only sibling. She actually struggled with drug addiction for about 10 years. And she's okay with me telling this story. She's actually come on my other show that I do and talked about it openly. So she, at the time of her final arrest, and I say that because she was arrested at least a dozen times, but was never thrown the book, right? She would get a night here, a weekend here. But when she was arrested and actually put in for 3 years into prison, she at the time was on methamphetamines and black tar heroin. And we're talking simultaneously. And so really, she thanked the judge after she was in and clean and sober. She thanked the judge for throwing the book at her, because she probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that prison sentence. But the rehabilitation aspect is big, because she was in for about a year until she was eligible to be part of this great rehabilitation program inside the prison. And it's a really unique, because it's the inmates, it's ran by the inmates, and they hold each other accountable to the point where your body language, they will call you out if you roll your eyes, if you huffy puffy, any signs of an attitude, you are called out by the other inmates that are in this program. And so for a year and a half, approximately, she was in that program and graduated from it and was able to get time cut off her sentence. And now she's been clean and sober for almost 6 years. She celebrates her 6th year. They call them birthdays. That will be in November. So that's amazing. And she is a sponsor to so many women, and she's even what they call a grand sponsor. And that's when one of the women she's a sponsor to is now a sponsor to somebody, has a sponsee. So she's been doing so much, and she goes out and speaks publicly about everything that she's been through, and about just how to become clean and sober and all the work that it takes to put into it. But if it wasn't for that rehabilitation program in the prison, she's very confident that she would not be here today. Especially, I have to note this, because we see the fentanyl going out of control in our society. And she said, wow, if that was a thing 5+ years ago when she was out using, she said it would be a different ball game because of how incredibly different it is. It's next level stuff. But we're very grateful that she was given the opportunity to be in that rehab program. And we have this thriving young woman in our family today.
Wow, Kristin, thanks for sharing that. Man, I'm proud of your sister. That's a powerful story. You know, the goal is to reduce recidivism, and fortunately, your sister's not a statistic.
Right.
That's great. Kristin, I've never told you this, but I did lose a family member by marriage. It was my ex-wife's nephew. We lost him due to fentanyl, and he had no idea. It's believed that it was marijuana laced with fentanyl.
Oh, wow.
So, that was a very challenging issue. People have got to be very careful.
Yes.
All right, moving right along. So we've talked about deterrence, rehabilitation. The next is incapacitation. And again, as we discuss these, you got to understand something. There are people who are strong proponents and of particular sentencing types, and then there's other people that are against it. And incapacitation literally means you're removing a person from society, and that can also lead up to the death penalty. And the reason people are against it is it's basically society and the law saying we give up on you. Right. And don't get me wrong, I certainly believe there's a place for that, but the argument is that this person is a lost cause. There's no hope. So we just need to incapacitate them for life or whatever it is, and it's over. It's done. They're toast. Then this one is very interesting, Kristin. You're going to like this, and it's restoration. Some people call it restorative justice. And restorative justice, in that situation, the person that's been charged, the victim, the prosecutor, and defense attorney, they all agree, and the judge approves it, that they go through this restorative process. And in a lot of these cases, the victim gets to talk to the offender and explain how this impacted them and their family or their livelihood. And there have been some positive reports of that where inmates really felt bad about what they did. Right. And but you and I in other episodes have talked about narcissism, psychopaths, sociopaths. And as you can imagine, if someone has a personality characteristic like that or a disorder, that's not going to work. And I had to learn something, Kristin, is that, man, there are some people who've been in prison, they could win Academy Awards. I mean, they can make you feel like they have changed their ways and they're doing great things, but in fact, they're really not. But what's your thoughts? And let me tell you one other one. When this was first being experimented with, there was people who had shoplifted, had to stand outside the same store they shoplifted from wearing a big sign that said, "I stole from this store." They had to stand there all day. So what's your thoughts on restorative justice?
I've seen moms do that on like TikTok when their kid took a candy bar or something and they go stick them in front of the store with a sign on them. And I'm like, wow, is this okay? But okay, so it made me think of, I love mixed martial arts. And so recently I watched Conor McGregor's Netflix series. And in one of the first episodes, it showed he had attacked his opponent's bus and broken windows out, and he did get arrested. And part of his sentencing was community service. And so he was working in a church, and it shows him cleaning the pews. And the cool part was you see him interacting with church staff and church goers. And then they interview him after, and he talks about how it really was a life changer for him to really take him out of his self-centered life and put him into this different environment and to connect with level-headed, regular people. It did work, it seemed, at least from what they showed in the interview. Have you seen that Netflix series?
Kristin, I just watched that. I watched it last week, and I
figured you might have, because you love MMA too.
I love MMA, and that's Khabib you're talking about. There was a long conflict that was developing, and Khabib being Russian and Conor being Irish. It was, man, that was a huge, huge fight.
Yes.
The steps that led up to that. But you're right. I do believe that Conor was moved. I don't know if it's long lasting, but I do believe he was moved in that moment. I thought, how cool is that he's in a church and he's reading some of the ancient writings, and it was very cool.
It was. I mean, did he really think he had a chance against a kid that grew up wrestling bears? I don't know, but...
Well, yeah, you got to understand the warrior mindset. They all think they're going to win. And I do believe Conor thought he would beat him. And that's a warrior mindset. It's on another level. And I will tell you, even when I was competing, Kristin, I had an instructor. We trained the old Japanese way, and we were convinced. We would start off with a strong kia from the diaphragm. When we would start, when they would say achime, we would say ai real loud, and it was on. And I never intended to lose. I can tell you that.
I'm getting Karate Kid vibes.
It's a yeah.
I think Mr. Miyagi might have done that as well. That makes me want to go watch it. Yeah, great.
Oh my
stuff
God,
there.
are you kidding? I've loved Cobra Kai. It brought back so many memories for me.
Such a great series. Yes.
I wish Ralph Macchio would learn martial arts though. But other than that, it's been a great series.
Johnny's my favorite for sure.
Well,
in
of
this
course
new
he
series. He aged the best, I must say.
I think you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
So just a little bit more. I don't want to bore people, so I'm just going to touch on these. But the aspects, the way correctional officers are able to institute, the authority that they have the same kind of personalities that you see in the business world. There's the dictator, which is exactly what you think. Then there's the friend, and that one, the lines can get blurred on that one. They believe that if they befriend the inmate, then the inmate will do what they want. But sometimes the inmate will sell them out, and that can lead also to illicit behavior, as can some of these other types. And then you've got the merchant who basically, they trade things, sell things to the inmate. The turnkey, they could care less. They're there punching a clock. They don't care about the inmates. They don't care about anyone but themselves. The climber, we've got those in the corporate world. They're just out for a promotion. The reformer, and that's the know-it-all. They know everything there is to know, and you can ask them, and they will tell you. I've seen a few of those in the work world. The do-gooder, that's the legitimate person that goes in with that compassionate attitude. They believe they can change the world. They usually get tainted after a while, but they do want to persuade people and help them convert and rehabilitate. And then there is the problem correctional officer. And in my career, Kristin, I've seen some really heinous things come out from correctional officers selling drugs,
Right.
exchanging sexual favors, covering up crimes, giving into. Here's the thing that people don't realize, Kristin, is let's say someone is in a gang, and we'll talk about the gangbangers, but there's people in a gang. Think about this. You're making, let's say, $50,000 a year, and that may be high in some states. And you've got actual gang members, Crips, Bloods, Hells Angels, whatever. All their buddies are out. They're out on the streets, and they could potentially find you.
Right.
So correctional officers have to deal with a lot of dynamics. There's all these moving parts every day. And I think a lot of times they are overworked and underappreciated. And that's just a side note. But imagine that you had to worry about the safety of your family. And it's not frequent, but it's not impossible that there might be retaliation or something like that. So that's also something that most people never talk about. Are some of the threats. What do you think about some of those? The dictator, the merchant, the turnkey, like reformer.
Oh my gosh.
Do you see that in the business world?
Absolutely. And Dog the Bounty Hunter is definitely the do-gooder. I don't know if you remember that show, but
everybody knows Dog, Kristin.
Everyone knows Dog. So as soon as he would get him in the car, then he was like turning their life around or attempting to. And I always wondered, I'm like, I wonder if anyone ever truly turned it around. But he did try, at least when the cameras were on. He was working on that. But absolutely, I've witnessed almost every single one of these in the business world.
When we were in law enforcement, for some reason, law enforcement don't really like bounty hunters. They feel like a lot of them are wannabe cops.
Like security guards here.
Yeah, same thing.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I'm not trying to disparage anyone, but when Dog would put on his leather gloves and they would shoot their pellet guns at people and stuff, it was really funny for me.
A little hokey.
But he was such a caricature that I did enjoy watching it, I have to admit. Like, it was interesting to watch him. But that was a dynamic that always played out. Law enforcement did not like bounty hunters.
Yeah, no, I know. Well, it is the same. We do see the same here with security guards because a lot of them did try to become police officers and didn't make it for psych eval or one reason or another. But then any opportunity they get, they can't wait to get in on some action.
That's right.
Which can be messy. So you got to be really careful with that dynamic. All right, let's discuss the prison code.
Oh, yes.
Super interesting.
Let's do.
All right. I did a little bit of research, and you can school me on this, Ron. But the elements of the prison code that I found were 1, do not interfere with the interests of other inmates. Do not quarrel with other inmates. And that is different than physical altercations. Do not exploit other inmates. Do not whine. Be tough. Be a man. Do not trust the guards or staff, and remember that prison officials are wrong and inmates are right. How'd I do with my research?
Wow, that was good, Kristin.
All right.
Let me jump in on a couple of those.
Please.
Especially when you said do not quarrel, and you're right, that's not talking about fights. Here's what people don't understand. Are they saying you can't ever disagree with another inmate? No, they don't want to hear you arguing and whining. Either fight it out, shank it out, do something, but you're not going to sit there and argue. And I think that's interesting. But also, do not exploit other inmates. Inmates get exploited all the time. That's a general rule. But if someone's really violent, they're going to exploit inmates and no one's going to say anything. But I can tell you this, the last thing that you said, do not trust the guards and the inmates always right. Man, they live by that one. They never trust the guards. And the inmate's right and the guard is wrong. And if someone is a narc or a rat, as they call it, there's going to be repercussions, that's for sure. You can't break the prison code.
I can imagine. Absolutely. So we're going to talk about inmate types. And I know, Ron, you're going to break these down, but I'm really excited for this one because the dynamic is so unique.
I'm itching to get into this. So you've got societal laws, and then you've got prison laws. And They vary, and they're not exactly the same by any stretch. Now, I'm not going to cover all these because some of them are very self-explanatory.
Right.
But you have like the real man, the mean dude, the bully, the agitator. But the real man, Kristin, What does that mean to you?
The real man. To me, when I think of a real man, I think of chivalry, but I can't imagine that exists in prison.
Kristin, I thought for sure you would say my name, but hey. So yeah, it's not chivalry. But
No.
Here's the thing about prison life is it's more antiquated. They're looking at kind of a 70s, the Marlboro man. A real man is a real man. Their definition of a man: tough, muscular, burly. The mean dude, the bully, are exactly what you think. And a bully, of course, will always look for its prey and look for weaker inmates. The agitator, I've been told by correctional officers, that's almost their least favorite because that's that person, that kind of cowardice, but they're always agitated. They're always creating a problem.
Little weasel.
Yeah, and Lord knows there are people in every organization, and if you're listening, you probably have a name running through your brain right now of the agitator. Then you've got, the hedonist, and the hedonist, but only because it's a unique word we don't hear much now. They live in the now. They don't care about anything. That's why they're called a hedonist. They don't care about the inmates. They don't care about the other correctional officers. They punch a clock. Then you got the opportunists trying to get, promoted, the retreatist, and those are difficult for wardens and others to deal with. They just want to be left alone. They don't want conflict, all that stuff. Now, this next one, the legalist, Chris and I had issues with this because I prepared the federal pre-sentence investigations and state when I was a state probation officer. And these sentencing guidelines are very complex. So, for example, if someone is a drug dealer and you find out they were giving direction or they were leading 5 or more people, you can give them an enhancement. Now, this is after they've pled guilty, and this is the sentencing phase. So this report is, again, very detailed, and the judge uses the report to pronounce an appropriate sentence. Mm-hmm. So you might add the fact that they were a kingpin. You might add the fact there was a gun found in the car, so you give them a gun enhancement. Their criminal history comes into play. So there's all these dynamics, and I can remember sitting in court, Kristin, on like a 2-day sentencing because the attorneys objected, like defense attorney objected to my report. A lot of times the U.S. attorney would be in support of the report, but not always because we're in between. We represent the court, not either the Justice Department or defense. But I've sat in sentencings before with an offender sitting at the table, staring at me, almost growling at me the entire time. And occasionally I would give him a look just to let him know I'm not intimidated by you, but I can't sit there like an idiot. I try to be professional.
Right.
And one time, just a quick side note, one time I'm sitting in court and this one person that had glared at me the day before, I gave him a bunch of enhancements because it was appropriate. It wasn't out to get him. It was appropriate. And he had actually committed murder. And I had added a cross-reference and added murder to a drug case. That's a complicated story, but it happened. So I'm sitting and the probation officer sits at a different table, neutral. So you got the U.S. Attorney's Office, you got defense, and then you've got the probation officer. Well, they brought this particular inmate out. And instead of walking him in front of my table, they had took the handcuffs off of him, the U.S. Marshals. He walked behind me and actually tapped me on the shoulder.
Oh my
Well, of course I jumped. I wasn't expecting it. And he looked at me and said, "Scared you, didn't I?"
Oh my gosh.
I did respond, Kristin. I said it'd be a cold day in hell when you scared me.
Nice.
But I did jump like crazy. I wasn't expecting that.
Regardless. Yeah.
And I did
absolutely.
go to the head U.S. Marshal, complained, and the deputy U.S. Marshal was reprimanded because that was totally inappropriate to bring that person behind me. So anyway, back to the list.
Who knows what else could have happened?
No, it's true. He could have literally started choking me at minimum, or at least hit me really hard,
Yeah,
because
anything.
he did not like me, Kristin. I know enough about body language. He did not like me.
Yeah. You were able to read your room, sounds like.
In that pre-sentence report, it's complicated. The legalist, that's the jailhouse lawyers that you hear about. So it wasn't uncommon for me to be interviewing someone or sharing information with someone that are like, well, inmate so-and-so told me that you'd try to do this. And their attorneys would usually interject, but the jailhouse lawyers, now there are some that are very smart. I'm not going to deny that. The problem is they bring their attitude and their emotions into it. They're just trying to show you how to beat the man, not be smart.
Right.
So the legalist was a problem for me.
I could see that.
Then you've got the radical, you've got the colonist. That's the person, they're in there a long time usually. They make prison their home. They know everything. They just adapt, and prison's home now, and I'm going to learn everything I can, make the best of it. Man, they are able to accumulate things you wouldn't believe. And the creativity in prison, they can make hooch or wine out of almost anything, it seems.
Yeah.
They can make weapons out of anything. It's just crazy how talented, when people are focused, what they can do.
Seriously.
Then you've got the religious inmates. That is exactly what it says. That becomes a problem when the prisons are trying to cater to all the different religions and the restrictions. But usually religious inmates don't cause a lot of problems.
Right.
Now, Kristin, here's two. The punk. Now, that's an old term, but it hasn't changed. What do you think of when you hear punk?
I think of a punk rocker. Spiked hair, leather.
Yeah, okay. A punk in prison is usually weak, and they're usually exploited sexually. And we talked about this before, but sometimes they become a wife. And it's the traditional wife, not, what is purported a lot of times in today's culture. But it's like a 1970s wife, and they might make them food. They might clip their toenails, Kristin.
Oh, my goodness. That is so... I mean, I believe it. And I have a toenail thing where my sister told me there was a melee in one of the prison cells because someone clipped their toenails and didn't clean up after themselves. And the person sharing the cell with them found this disgusting, massive toenail, and a melee broke out. So, oh boy, clipping someone else's toenails at will. That's next level. You
seem to have a lot of tapeworms, toenail stories.
I know.
Anyway,
I know.
So the punk is misery. It really is. And by the way, those inmates, when they get released, don't think they're normal and they can just go right back into culture. They're doing all of these things to try to survive. And then you have the gangbanger. I already mentioned that. But if you are already in a gang before you come in, you're going to honor your code, the street code.
Right.
You're going to bring that in. But a lot of times, for protection and other reasons, people form gangs inside the prison, a unique gang, and they develop their own rules and regulations and so forth. But it's worth mentioning, Kristin, that prisons are very racially divided. You don't have a white guy, black guy, Hispanic guy just hanging out, chatting. That doesn't happen in your major high-security prisons. They might have to work side by side, but when it's time to go out on the yard for rec time, in the cafeteria, they're not going to be buddy-buddy, that's for sure.
Right.
So that's a gangbanger. So that's, I think that's inmate types, but we see some of that play out in the world today.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The dynamic is so interesting, and it sounds like they need your diversity training module that you've created.
I think so. Good plug.
Let's go ahead. Yeah, you're welcome. What's it called? I know harmony's in there.
Culture, harmony, and celebration.
I love it. All right, Ron, let's briefly discuss some aspects of women in prison, because it is very different. Why they go in is generally quite different than men and their experience. So it's worth noting that 60% of women in local jails have not been convicted of a crime and are awaiting trial. Now you ask yourself why, I'm sure. Generally, women don't have the funds to make bail, unlike men. Thought that was really interesting. Jail is especially deadly for women, as women have a higher mortality rate than men in jails. They're generally dying of drug and alcohol intoxication, actually twice the rate of men. And women commit suicide at higher rates than men in jail, actually 65% higher. And the other thing is that women are coming in to jail or prison with some type of health condition. So they're coming in with a health condition, and you touched on this earlier, but it's difficult sometimes in jail to be able to get everything you need, right? Even dental, things like that. So when you're coming in with a condition, that can be scary for those women and men that they need a certain level of treatment, and you just don't get it there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That mortality rate surprises me.
Right.
I was not aware of that until, the research for those podcasts. So We will just touch briefly on women in prison, but it is very important. It's just the population's much smaller. There's a lot fewer females than there are males in prison. But one of the things, Kristin, is, we do want to be informational and we want people to get involved. And the opportunities that women have are lacking in many facilities across the country. And let's look at just a few characteristics. Again, we will not go into depth, but characteristics of women inmates, they largely resemble the male population, very racially divided, and similar age groups, that type thing. But they're more likely to be serving time for drugs. They're not as violent. That's just the truth. There's not as many violent offenses committed by women. They have shorter criminal records than males. And this is a very unique dynamic, but many of them, or a lot of them, have been sexually abused or physically abused when they come in, more so than males. And of course, that type of trauma brings a challenge into all aspects of the prison, from the mental health staff, to even the correctional officers. It's very difficult when you come in with that kind of trauma. And I will tell you, when I used to supervise offenders, when I get a female person come out of prison, they were not allowed to see, let's say, a male convicted felon, a particular person they'd had relations with before. And I would literally tell them, you cannot have any contact with that individual. I don't know how many times they would go right back to that individual, get abused again, and then it would all, of course, come to surface, and then they're back in prison. So anyway, just a few other things. These are the female inmate roles. You have the cool inmate. They have a previous criminal record, which you got to have street cred. That makes you a lot cooler in prison. And these people, the cool inmates, they don't really cause trouble. They know how to navigate in there. They're not looking for trouble. They're serving their time. Now, you got the square inmate. Again, some of these terms come out of the 60s. Someone's a square. But that's someone that doesn't have a prison record and they don't know how to navigate prison. They're inexperienced. And then they try to bring their social norms with them. And
that doesn't work.
Tradition doesn't work in prison. You got to adopt the inmate code, not the social norms that you brought from the street. Then you got the life inmate. It's a little bit similar to the cool inmate. They're habitual offenders. They've got a large record and they've accepted the fact that they're going to be in there for a long time. And but they also really support the inmate subculture. They're going to call you out if you try to bring your outside culture into the prison. They're very knowledgeable that way. So some other things, I'm not going to go into detail, but there's situations where females enter the prison while they're pregnant. There's situations where, again, they've brought all this trauma. You mentioned drug addiction and abuse, but because especially in the early days of prisons, it was predominantly male. Most people agree, and I serve on a national board, that the female population are underserved because of many of those aspects. There's not even that many federal prisons.
Like prison is set up for men and women are just kind of fitting into the setup that's already in place for men.
That's exactly right. Now, again, there's some strides. There's been legislators and people that have given this attention, but there's still a long ways to go. Now, before people think I'm a bleeding heart, I absolutely, I understand that violent offenders need to be locked away and we need to protect culture, protect society. But Kristin, if we could step back from the talking points and we can just look, number one, of course, there's a breakdown in families and culture that causes people to commit crimes in the first place. That's the first place that needs to be addressed. If we're going to be solution-minded, let's start when they're young before all these things start to happen. And the next phase is once someone enters, it is important to get the rehab. And if it's someone that is a nonviolent offender, maybe we need to look at releasing some people and then putting our focus on violent offenders or those that create the most societal harm. And again, I'm trying to be balanced here and trying to get our listeners to do their small part. This is an important issue, whether it's Boys and Girls Clubs or whatever, anything that we can do to prevent this type of behavior, because you don't have to turn on the news 5 minutes and you're going to see what's really going on, or social media, the crime rates, the violent things that are happening. And we got to stand up. We got to protect culture. We got to do our best to help people rehabilitate and try to move forward on this issue. And it also costs billions.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's
very
so expensive. Yeah.
Yes. Paid for by taxpayers primarily.
Oh, how do you feel, Kristin? What's your thoughts?
So many thoughts. I mean, it's wild to understand. My main takeaway was the fact that what we do in society today there's just no room for it in prison, and how it must be pretty wild for those that are a new offender to go in and maybe try to live a normal life while confined in prison. You just can't do that. So finding that new normal. But my sister, I have to tell you guys, she did say, I remember giving her props because I was like, I don't know how you did it. And she goes, you know what? I think you'd be a boss in there. So I said, I guess a leader's a leader.
I believe it. And that's actually very true. I love the fact you're talking about how it's so different in there. Imagine then if you've been in 10 years and you're coming back to the regular social norms.
Yeah.
So that's why you need halfway houses and you need things that help people. And of course, I love probation because that was my career. And I do think there's some officers doing a great job helping people reintegrate into society. And I think there's a lot of leadership lessons you could take from this episode, but also I hope you found this interesting. It's not talked about much, not nearly enough. And, but yeah, I've really enjoyed this, Chris, and I'm glad we took on another unique issue.
Yes, absolutely. More to come. And for everyone, thank you so much for all you've done for us, your likes, your following us, your ratings. It's taking us far, and we really appreciate it. And please continue to share our podcast with family, friends, neighbors, and interact with us. We're always open to suggestions on topics to discuss. And actually, our next episode is going to be based on a submission for a topic that one of our listeners wants to hear us hash out. So We listen to you.
We do. All right. Be the leader you're meant to be.
We'll see you next week.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.